As usual, not everyone is here yet, but we're going to begin a little meditation. So find a comfortable position for yourself. Let me turn off my fan. Relax your body. Relax your mind. Place your attention, first of all, and then your mindfulness on the respiration, the breathing in front. When the distractions have subsided, your breathing is regular, bring your attention to your mental consciousness as always. If you're familiar with the term, try to bring up a remembering consciousness, just a memory of that clear light nature that we've meditated on for many weeks. If not, inspect the contents of your mind. And try to focus on the space between thoughts, depriving the thoughts of their energy, leading to what seems to be a non-conceptualizing state. It's still conceptual, your observation of the mind. It's not a direct perceiver of it, direct realization of it, but it's not, it can become non-conceptualizing in the sense that the busy mind, thoughts, images, and so forth, are subdued, absent. Let go of your attention to the five senses, like a tortoise withdrawing its limbs into the shell. Bring your attention to your heart. It's your mental consciousness. Let go of the still remaining tendency to sense the body looming there. It's just an appearance to your mind. But don't let go of the ego, the sense of I. With very subtle attention, try to recognize how it's appearing, how it seems to be. Here we're not talking about the general sense of, gross sense of I. You know, I am a painter, or I am a monk, or I am a man or woman. But just the innate sense of I. Innate means that it's not something that's created by some conceptual considerations. You know, I'm this or that. I'm old, I'm young. Watching for some time, you may recognize that there is a sense of one's self-identity, me, I, as existing as something real, something not just given a name, a nickname, or an imputation, not just designated I, but something really there from its own side. In the fundamental of the path, in the principle of the path called wisdom recognizing emptiness, this sense of I that we're trying to recognize is called the object of negation. This is the first essential point that we talked about last week. Second essential point in meditating on emptiness with this simple method is to understand the pervasion. What that means is that in this case, we use this statement, if two things exist, they either have to be the same or different. That's a general logical statement. If they're not identical, then they're different. So here, the two things that we're considering are the five aggregates and this self. If the self that's appearing, that seems to be inherently existent, it would either have to be the same as the aggregates, and not just generally the same, it would have to be inherently the same in every way as the aggregates, or would have to be different than the aggregates, inherently different in every way. In a sense, that alternative, the alternative of being different in every way, inherently different, is the easiest to refute, to negate, to recognize that it's not the case. Because if the sense of the I, was inherently different than the aggregates, if you were to experience something with the aggregates, eat a spoon of oatmeal or have a sip of tea or get stung by a bee, you wouldn't think, I am eating, because it's completely different. You wouldn't think, I'm drinking tea. You wouldn't think, I've been stung. If it were identical to the aggregates, in the sense of being innately identical in every way, there would be a fallacy that either there would have to be multiple eyes for the five aggregates, five different eyes, one for the form aggregate, one for the consciousness aggregate, one for the feeling, discrimination, and compositional factors aggregates. Or conversely, there would have to be one aggregate corresponding to the one I. Going back and forth between these, once we've identified the object of negation, the I, recalling that if the I existed, it would have to be inherently one with the aggregates or inherently different. Not just the conventional I, but here the inherently existent I. That's the privation. And then going to those two alternatives, it can't be inherently different than the aggregates. And it can't be inherently one with the aggregates. Therefore, this sense of I that has appeared to me since beginningless time, in every life, wherever I was, a sense of I, this is an appearance that it has existed, but has no real basis in fact. And it's like an illusion, like a dream. Like a reflection that's thought to be the actual object. It doesn't exist at all. The appearance of the I exists, but the object that we imagine it refers to does not exist. It's just an imagination. See if you can let go of that, just with that recognition. The I that I have been following all this lifetime, believing in, letting it dominate me, creating attachment, anger, sorrow. This I does not exist at all. With your mental consciousness, if you have an instant of recognition of that, just let your mind, your mental consciousness, remain on that understanding. The I does not exist at all the way that I have been believing it. All of the actions of the past, maybe things that you regret, negative actions, there was never an I that performed those actions the way that you thought. Then rejoicing in the fact that we have a chance to have a very, very small practice of this wisdom of emptiness, recognizing the self does not exist inherently. This is a result of our self being a human now, having met the Dharma, the teaching still existing, spiritual friends and community to support, benefactors to support the center. Basically, we have this opportunity because we have received a perfect human rebirth this lifetime, which is very rare and highly meaningful. Think that I'm going to use the time that I have left in this class today to focus on the Dharma realizations. We've already talked about the principle of renunciation and the principle of bodhicitta. Here, especially the principle of the wisdom realizing emptiness, based not only on our own desire to be free of suffering, sort of a Hinayana attitude, but broadening our vista and recognizing all sentient beings within cyclic existence who are suffering. They're caught in cyclic existence. They're not yet out of cyclic existence. They're still bedeviled by this sense of I, believing it, not seeing any alternative other than to fight in the world for possessions. Out of compassion for them, think I'm going to pursue this path to be able to eventually teach them, lead them out of cyclic existence, into the everlasting happiness of enlightenment. I'm going to participate this morning in order to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. That's our agenda. Our motivation. And then bringing your attention back, rising from your meditative equipoise. I wonder, anyone have you don't have to feel that you're exaggerating. Anyone have any kind of experience during that meditation that they'd like to share? Was it confusing? Could you kind of get it? There's David. Okay, there he is. David. Unmute thyself.
Yeah, I have a problem reconciling the view of the I with the Vedic view of the I, in that the Buddhist view says that they're both delusions, they're both illusions. In terms of the Vedic view, they say there's no such thing as the individual, but there's the self. And the self is a non-dualistic concept. But in Buddhism, well, we're saying there's no such thing as a self or an I.
Right. Yeah.
In terms of the Vedic view, the self is just everything that is the entire universe. You can't separate the I from the universe. So, I mean, it's because that's looking at it from a polarity point of view. There is no difference. Everything is united, but there's still no individual self. But the Buddhists say there's no such thing as a self, so I just can't really.
You're conflicted because you're from the Buddhist point of view, we would say you are still holding on to intellectually formed tenets. That is the Vedic view that you've been taught and you've read about and you believe, you've investigated and so forth. Yeah, so it's just you have to, you sort of have to weigh that in your own mind, which seems to be more precise. There is there is at least one Vedic school which is quite similar to the Buddhist view, and I can't remember the name off the top of my head. The non-dualistic, one of the non-dualistic schools. So here, what we're saying is that in addition to there's no self, there's no great self outside. Even the Buddha doesn't have an inherently existent self. There's no great Atma, because if anything existed inherently, the way that it appears to our mind, it would not be dependent on causes and conditions. For instance, it would not be a dependent arising, like the Christians and peoples of the book, the Abrahamic religions, that talk about a God as that God is all powerful, omniscient, omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, and so forth, similar to the omniscient mind of Buddhism. But they say that God really exists and controls everything, but has no cause. That there was no, God was not born, or God was not caused. So think about that. Susie, you have your little icon hand up.
Thank you, Venerable. Sorry, I don't have my screen on.
Okay.
I just wanted to share with you that I had something really special happen, but I don't think I can put it into words. I'm sorry, but I just wanted to let you know. So maybe I'll think about it.
Yeah,
sorry?
you have put it into words. You said
okay. Yeah, I wish I was able to articulate stuff like this more, but I want to say spaciousness, but that doesn't cut it, or I don't know.
Yeah. So we shouldn't expect that in one, little practice session, you'll have, you immediately understand emptiness or realize emptiness. It's a cumulative process, supported by accumulation of merit, practices that Geshe stresses very much. Shankar was reminding me this morning, Geshe likes to lead people in actual physical practices and so forth, where you create merit that help to support the realizations. So we need to continue doing that. We need to study to understand well what we're trying to do to eliminate misconceptions. And then in practice, in meditation, takes a long time to actually recognize the object of negation clearly, where you can remain for, say, hours on that. Right now, we don't have that. Most of us, maybe any of us, have that ability, single-pointed concentration, to remain on one object for many hours, although that's achievable this lifetime. Unless you have some, incredible obstacle in your mind, with the right practice, you can achieve that. So, you might like to think this lifetime, it would be great to do a long retreat where you get, when you get rid of all other activities and, you spend your time meditating on the three principles of the path. And when you're at the point of meditating on emptiness, spending weeks or months recognizing the object of negation, recognizing the pervasion that if it existed, it would have to be one with the aggregates or different than the aggregates, and then analyzing the faults of either of those alternatives. And the conclusion of that, when you sort of everything comes together, it's almost like an aha moment. Do you know that expression? Is that something you've aha? That thing that I've been believing in since beginningless time doesn't exist at all. And to make it clear in your mind, to use the examples that the Buddha gave, the various examples of things that appear that don't exist the way that they appear, like a reflection, like a dream. You know, the objects in your dream don't exist the way that they appear, but they appear so clearly and really real that you believe them. You know, echoes, the example I gave several times of, you know, thinking that there was a dog over there barking from the, and I realized it was actually the echo of this dog barking. So it was empty of dog. My mind was thinking there was dog there. So that kind of feeling, there's nothing there. Just remaining on that with no more analysis, when you have that certainty, that can bring about this some kind of experience. Amanda, you have a thought?
I just had a question. So this merely imputed I at one stage, when we're realized beings, that will no longer be there, but there'll be something there, and there'll be something aware of that.
Okay,
do you want me to repeat myself?
No. So when you say become a realized being, so there are various stages, right, up until Buddhahood.
Okay.
So when you first have an insight into emptiness, it doesn't even have to be path of seeing where you have a direct realization of emptiness. You don't even have to be on the Buddhist path yet to have an insight into emptiness. You don't have to be on the path of preparation or the path of accumulation, path of preparation. Even before then, through logic, you can have an insight, a realization, understanding that the I doesn't exist the way that it appears. Enhancing that over time, when you arise from that meditation, the I still appears to your mind. There still is that sense of I, but having had some experience that it doesn't exist, it's like almost like laughable. Like, oh my gosh, that pesky I is still appearing, as the Buddha explained, that phenomena to anyone other than a Buddha, when you're not in meditative equipoise, all phenomena appear to be inherently existing, inherently existent. So the I still appears to be inherently existent, but through your practice, you begin to develop confidence that it doesn't exist the way that it appears. As your memory of your experience begins to fade during the day or the weeks, you again allow that your ignorance to believe in that I and let it instigate attachment and anger and pride and jealousy and low self-esteem and all the rest of the afflicted states of mind. In meditative equipoise, that is a deep meditation where you've analyzed and you've come to the conclusion that the I does not exist. The I does not appear. All that appears to your mind is a vacuity. So again, we have to remember the word appear doesn't mean like a visual appearance. All that your mind is recognizing is the certainty of negation. What you were, in fact, you're not even thinking at that point, oh, the I does not exist. You may have thought that way while you're analyzing, but once you come to the conclusion, you just rest in that vacuity. The certainty that has been induced by this logic. Then when you arise from that, you again can verbalize and think, oh, I just recognized emptiness. I just had an insight into emptiness. That I that I've been believing in since beginningless time doesn't exist. As you progress along the path, once you've had a direct realization of emptiness, say on the Bodhisattva path, the Bodhisattvas, say on the path of seeing, on the first bhumi and the second bhumi and so forth, for them, phenomena appear to be inherently existent, but they have full confidence because they've realized emptiness directly. They have full confidence that they don't exist that way. They're not, for them, they're not called conventionalities. They're just called dependent arisings. The appearances that arise due to our karma that we've created individually and collectively. Collectively, we all see the same sun and moon. They have similar kind of characteristics. That's due to our collective karma. And our individual karma is our individual responses to the appearances, the way that we perceive them. Only at the stage of Buddhahood, of enlightenment, will phenomena no longer even appear to us as inherently existent. There no longer will be even the appearance of an I that you can kind of laugh at. You can kind of chuckle, oh, there it is, that pesky I. It doesn't even appear to the Buddha. The Buddha does know how things appear to us by his clairvoyance that knows our minds. And out of his full development of compassion, works to, lead us out of that deluded state. Does that help, Amanda?
Yes, it sort of does. I'm trying to imagine when the Buddha,
Mm-hmm.
the Buddha is the five aggregates still?
So you can say that the Buddha has five aggregates. You can say that the emanation bodies, the Nirmanakaya and the Sambhogakaya, have five aggregates. But let's say and in terms of Tantra, you can say that the Buddha, even his exalted wisdom, his wisdom, omniscient mind, has a form aggregate, even when he's not emanating the Nirmanakaya or Sambhogakaya. You know those two words, Nirmanakaya and Sambhogakaya? Sambhogakaya is a subtle body that the Buddha emanates in the pure realm of Akanishta to teach Arya Bodhisattvas. Doesn't teach anyone lower than that, Arya Bodhisattvas. But to be able to teach people in the world, the Buddha emanates a grosser body called the Nirmanakaya, or emanation body. So that has obviously a form aggregate. People see gross form, and people can infer the existence of his mind through his speech, that he's motivated, he's understanding their questions, so they know he has a mind and so forth. Even if you just talk about the Buddha not emanating bodies, the omniscient mind still has a form aggregate, the subtlemost wind, which is inexorably unified with that mind. It acts as the motility of that mind. just like our minds now have a gross and more subtle forms of prana, wind, or energy currents that act as their motility, like the example I've given earlier, the horse and the rider. Say you've epoxied, Velcroed and epoxied a rider on the horse so you can't separate them. Still, you can differentiate the rider from the horse. The rider can, through its motivation, say moving the reins, can cause the horse to move in a particular direction. And by that, the horseman or horsewoman also is transported that way. So the mind and its subtle wind are, inextricably joined like that. So you can call that a form aggregate of the body, of the Buddha, of the omniscient mind. So say, for instance, in the formless realm, we say that a being in the formless realm doesn't have a form aggregate, right? Just mind, just the four mental aggregates: consciousness, right? Discrimination, feeling, compositional factors. A Buddha still has those also. The Buddha's feeling aggregate is one that experiences great bliss everywhere, all the time. As an example of that, sometimes these great yogis have sort of demonstrate this in life. One of my teachers, for a brief time, Serkon Dorje Chang, they called him. There were two Serkon Rinpoches. I don't know, any of you have heard that name, Serkon Rinpoche? Serkon Rinpoche. Serkon Senchab Rinpoche was teacher of Lama Zopa Rinpoche and us, the Sangha. He had these very big ears last life. He was the being that George Lucas, I guess, who did Star Wars. Is that the right guy? He met in McLeodganj and fashioned Yoda on. If you saw a picture of Yoda and Serkon Rinpoche, said, "Oh my gosh, that's who he was." He modeled Yoda on, this wise person. So Serkon Rinpoche, Serkon Senchab Rinpoche, was related over many lifetimes with another individual who was called Serkon Dorje Chang, or Dorje Chang means Vajradhara, so someone who's recognized as having completed the tantric path to achieved enlightenment. Serkon Dorje Chang is said to be a reincarnation of Marpa, the translator, right? I think I've told you this before, right? Serkon Senchab Rinpoche is said to be an emanation, the reincarnation of Marpa's son, Dharmaduti. Dharmaduti was his precious son, and Dharmaduti was killed during the lifetime of Marpa while riding a horse by another yogi, not out of anger toward him, but recognizing that Dharmaduti had a lineage of transference of consciousness, to bring your consciousness out of your body into another person's body, forcing their consciousness out. And that this bodhisattva recognized that would be pernicious in the future, would be misused by others in the future. So he wanted to cause Dharmaduti, who was, the son of Marpa, to die so that lineage wouldn't be passed on. I think Dharmaduti was the one person who had that lineage at that time. So Dorje Chang, Serkon Dorje Chang, when he was still alive, the last life, in Swayambhunath in Nepal. He lived in a little room in a temple there. He was highly regarded, but he took the aspect of having a stroke. What's it called when you look like this? What's it called? Shankar, do you know the term? Anyone? Any of you know what I'm talking about?
Apoplexy, maybe?
Maybe apoplexy, something like that. And so people who didn't have respect or faith thought he's a charlatan, like he's a cripple, of course, different people who recognized that he had already achieved enlightenment, recognized he was emanating this form for a reason. So Serkan Dorjichang would be in his room. One story was that one of his disciples came, not complete faith, and saw that on his table there was a bottle of beer. On Serkan Dorjichang's table, there's a bottle of beer. And of course, monks they take a vow of not imbibing even a drop of alcohol, right? Intoxicants. Did you know that? That's one of the vows. Unlike the Catholic monks who I've visited in various countries, and at their lunch they pass around the bottle, and that's not a vow. They don't have a vow against that. So this disciple saw Serkan Dorjichang with a beer on his table and said, Rinpoche, precious one. Serkan Dorjichang, Rinpoche means, precious one. Rinpoche, you're a monk. You shouldn't be drinking that. You're breaking your vows. And Dorjichang nodded and said, let's go out. He took him outside down to the, what's the river there? Do you know any of is it the Bagmati? I can't remember. There's one river just by Swayambhu where the pigs live. It's muddy. People go to defecate, throw their garbage. The worst place. Do you have something in Santa Fe like that? So he brought him down there, and he picked up a little piece of pig excrement and ate it, and showed the expression of great bliss. So whatever the omniscient mind experiences, his feeling aggregate, he has all five aggregates, an emanation body, experiences in great bliss. So until we get to that state, we can't eat excrement. Maybe some yogis who are not yet Buddhas can transform that. But to the Buddha, everything is empty of inherent existence. He sees it as it actually is and experiences everything with the same experience of great bliss. That's the feeling. That's the feeling aggregate, right? We were talking in our class yesterday about Lorig, about our feelings, something different than the mind. Like the mind is here, and the mind experiences a feeling which is out there. No, feelings are consciousness. They're they're conscious phenomena. They are the mental factor feeling, which is the experience of either pain, pleasure, or neutral, sort of neutral. Of course, this whole spectrum. It's not just three. The whole spectrum of from pain to neutrality to a little bit better to bliss. Okay. Does anyone else have another qualm another thought from what we've been talking about? Shanka, you're thinking something? No. Jimmy, James? Larry, it's good to see you. Anything? Any thoughts? Alexis? Okay. Nadine? I bet you have some question. No? Oh yeah, come on. Are you unmuting or you don't have a question?
I have too many questions. I
Okay,
don't know.
so not too many, just one or two. Okay. Go on.
Okay. The meditation was extremely helpful for me because I have a family problem, and it really helped me to look through this problem and to find inner peace. And thank you so much. It helped me very much, the meditation.
Okay, good. Also, you can think the individuals, like my brother or my sister or something. I didn't have a sister, but or your crazy uncle, or we always use that example, crazy aunt. They are under the influence of grasping to this I, believing it, completely oblivious that it doesn't exist. So, on the bus, you could look around to see other people, or in your household, feel compassion for them, especially in the Nyingma tradition and the Kagyu tradition, when they talk about generating bodhicitta. In those traditions, they talk especially to, they put emphasis at the beginning a little bit on renunciation, but especially on realizing emptiness through Mahamudra or Dzogchen or something. They say that, oh, you don't have to meditate on bodhicitta first, because when you realize emptiness, then great compassion will easily grow when you recognize that other living beings not only have the suffering of suffering and changeable suffering and all pervasive compounded suffering, but you recognize that their basic suffering is the ignorance that's grasping to the I. And you can feel, once you've felt a little bit of liberation, a little bit of space, like, oh, wow, relief. All those things I think I did in the past, there was some karma created, definitely, but there was no person that I thought existed at the time that did them. That kind of realization also is one of the greatest ways of purifying negative karma. So when you apply the four opponent forces, the four opponent forces? Alexis, do you know the four opponent forces? Okay. You can think in particular, when you feel regret about the negative karmas that you've created in the past, you can think, I was under the belief at the time, the grasping at an I that influenced me to, out of attachment, lust, or jealousy, or anger, to create those actions, which are on my mind stream as seeds, karmic seeds. All living beings have the same situation. But once you recognize that there was no person there was no inherently existing action that was created. You didn't, smash that ant on purpose, or that mosquito on, there was no, inherently existent action that was created. There was no inherently existent actor. There was no inherently existent object of the action. That can help to purify more deeply the negative actions that are, the seeds of which are still on your mind stream. That can enhance your application of the four opponent forces. Okay, but here in particular with, say, family problems, yourself being, there's no, almost things the arrows they're shooting at you can go right through, you know, because there's no eye. There's no eye to protect once you've had a little bit of insight into that. And it's an object, they become greater objects of compassion, recognizing how they don't understand that at all. They really are completely under the influence of this ignorance that's grasping to a self of persons. Okay. So, continuing on, we have a couple more classes yet, so we'll finish the text, but I wanted to mention a little bit about logic today. So for instance, when you're applying this analysis in your mind, you know, the first recognizing the object of negation, and then recognizing, ascertaining the pervasion, that if it existed, it would have to be one with the aggregates or different than the aggregates, and then negating both of those alternatives. This could be understood in logic. There were great Buddhist logicians that codified how you can prove something logically. Generally, what we can use the general term syllogism or logical proof. Like say, for instance, the self, the inherently existent self, or the self does not the self, the subject, then the predicate or the thing that you're trying to prove is not inherently existent. Those two, the subject and the statement, is not inherently existent, or you could call that the predicate. They form what's called the thesis, right? The self is not inherently existent. You could break that thesis into parts, the subject and the predicate. Make sense? Maybe you've heard this before. Has anyone heard this before? Just out of curiosity. Shankar, you've heard this before, right? You've studied logic. Aaron, have you heard this before? Somewhat familiar. Ida? No one, okay. Alexis? Larry? Alexis? What are you going to say? Oh, okay. No. Okay, Doris has heard this before. I think that's what that means. So there's a subject, the predicate, that form the thesis that you're trying to prove. And then you need, to prove that, you need a logical sign or mark. For a long time, I wondered why they called it mark. But here's a way of understanding. Say, for instance, the sheep are coming in that have been out in the fields, all the different shepherds, and you've put a mark on your sheep, a red dot on its tail, or a blue star on its ear, or something like this. And you say, oh, that's mine. That shows something. So a logical mark or logical sign, here in this case, the self is not inherently existent because it's not inherently one with the aggregates, and it's not inherently different than the aggregates. It's a twofold sign in that case. That's called a logical proposition or syllogism. Generally, when you have a logical proposition like that, in order for it to function, to bring about a realization in your mind, there have to be certain factors that are met. You have to first determine, or in technical language, you have to ascertain that the subject, in this case, the self, is not one with the aggregates and is not different than the aggregates. That's the what's called the property of the subject. The subject, the self, and the sign or mark or reason. There has to be the subject has to be. You have to ascertain. You have to recognize, and that's what we were trying to do in meditation. You have to recognize that the subject is the sign. In this case, the self is not one with the aggregates and is not different than the aggregates. Not inherently one, not inherently different. That's called the property of the subject. You don't have to know this technical terminology to have meditated that way when we were meditating, but as you begin to study more and you encounter maybe some presentation of Buddhist logic, those terms may come up, and so it's worth knowing that. The other thing that has to be present is that you have to ascertain what's called the pervasion, not the perversion. That's the pervasion. So I used this word before, or necessity, and so the pervasion. So whereas the property of the subject involved the subject and the mark or the sign, the pervasion involves the predicate and the sign. Okay, right? Shanka, can you express what's called the forward pervasion is in that logical statement?
So it's inherent. It's not inherently. So self is not inherently existent because. What was the sign again? I forgot.
It's not inherently one with the aggregates and not inherently different than the aggregates.
Right. So the forward pervasion is when you say the predicate, everything, the predicate must be, is necessarily, or has, it must, everything that's a predicate must be, also be, have the sign, right? So everything that's not inherently existent must also be same as the aggregate and different from the aggregate.
Is that called the forward pervasion? Is it the other way around? That
or maybe it's the other
way. Whatever is, if it is the sign, there's a pervasion that if something is not one with the aggregates and is not inherently one with the aggregates and not inherently different than the aggregates, it is necessarily not inherently existent. So that would be called the forward pervasion, sort of necessity. You have to
sign to the predicate. Okay.
So when we were talking about in our meditation, that's something that you have to understand. There's also a third factor, which is called the reverse pervasion. But this is Sunday. This is our Sunday school class, so we're not going to go into that. Generally, if you've established the forward pervasion, there's no need to establish the reverse pervasion. Reverse pervasion would be something like, instead of saying if it's the sign, it is necessary that it is the predicate. Here you say if it's not the predicate, it's necessarily not the sign, sort of like a double.
Okay, so that's what I was. I get all the. I can never remember which one is a forward reverse.
So, but you need the not in there. So, so it's worth sort of having heard that as you, if you have a chance to study some of the other texts on Buddhist, presentation of establishing emptiness. There is a logical argument that's being given that you yourself are trying to set up in your own mind. And when all of those elements are present, you've established that the subject, the self, is not one with the aggregates and is not different than the aggregates, especially not inherently one, not inherently different. And that if it is not inherently different and not inherently the same as the aggregates, it is not inherently existent. Then once you've, in your mind, you've gone through these various things enough times that they both can become present at the same time in your mind. That's what's called an establishing cognition. At that point, you are just on the verge of having an inferential cognition. That is an inference that you have realized that the self is not inherently existent. You haven't yet realized it. You've established it in your mind, all these factors. And then the next instant is the aha moment when you have, just vacuity appears to your mind, that the I is not inherently existent. The moment before, when you have the establishing condition, you still have the thought, oh, the I is not inherently one with the aggregate, it's not inherently the same, therefore it's not inherently existent. You might still be using terminology and conception, but then when you have the inferential cognition, nothing else appears to your mind. There's no longer cogitating. It's not this, therefore it's this. All that appears is the conclusion, and you're not thinking at that point that the I is not inherently existent, but that wisdom consciousness has been impelled, has been produced by your logic. And as a result of that, when you arise from that meditation, you have certainty that you've realized emptiness. It's then that you say, oh, the I does not inherently exist. I've realized that. Okay, maybe this is more than you wanted. Okay, anyway, I just thought I would mention that. Doris. I hope I didn't give you intellectual indigestion.
No, always something to think about. Even in the meditation and prior to this, I don't have a clear understanding what the term pervasion means.
Okay, pervasion means necessity. You can think of something like, in a snowstorm, the snow has pervaded all the landscape, covers all the landscape. So covers, another word. So if there is a pervasion, that means if one thing pervades another, that means that if it is this thing, it is definitely covering this other thing. Say, for instance, if a person is a female, if something is a female, there is a pervasion that they are a person. There's a necessity that they're a person. How about the opposite? If they are a person, is there a necessity that they're a female? There's no pervasion, no? They could be a male, or they could be a eunuch, or something like that, right? So pervasions work one way. Like say in, what was it in mathematics, Venn diagrams? One thing pervades another, that means the pervader would be the thing that completely covers the other thing, like a smaller circle within a big circle.
So it's a superset basically in mathematics. Yeah.
There you go. Okay, superset. If that's the right term, I said there you go, but I don't know that I didn't know that was the term that's used. So that's kind of the meaning of pervasion, sort of necessity. If it is if one thing pervades another, means it covers it, like in terms of a Venn diagram. There's no instance of the thing that's being covered that's outside of this. This pervades it. It covers that. Does that make sense, Doris?
Yes, thank you very much, Venerable. And Shanka.
Yeah. Shanka, have you studied mathematics a lot, Shanka?
Well, not a lot, but it's part of my, well, it's the background for what I do for my job. So yeah.
Okay. So you know what you're talking about. Okay. So in our text, Lama Tzong Khapa wrote, and you should know that Lama Tzong Khapa was motivated to write this particular presentation of Lan Rim, the three principles of the path, or three principal aspects of the path, by his guru Manjushri, who he saw in mystic vision. You know, he could actually, at a certain point in his life, he could actually perceive Manjushri and ask questions. Wouldn't that be nice when you have some vexing problem that you could call up Manjushri? Yeah, Shanga.
I'm sorry, but
Yeah.
I have to. May I say this? I was, you suggested. Remember, you suggested reading Lama Tzong Khapa's biography that just recently came out, right?
Yes.
So I was reading it. I don't know, a couple of months ago. The section and towards the beginning, and he in the beginning he was communicating with Manjushri through a medium, right? This other guy who was, I can't remember his name, but anyway, so he was communicating to Manjushri through this medium. So his medium told him and he was in his like early 30s at this time. He told him that, oh, Manjushri wants to talk to you about this particular thing. And he says, oh, actually, I have to go to, Lama Tzong Khapa says, I have to go teach this thing at this so-and-so monastery. Tell him in 6 months' time, I'll talk to him. And I
don't remember that incident, but that would be kind of.
It's in that book, yeah.
So that medium, or as you call it, it's not ordinary medium like people. Sometimes you might think that there are no such things as mediums, that can, like in seances, is that what they call? Is that the right word? Seance, like channeling your Uncle Harry or something like that. Here in Buddhism, we believe that there are individuals who have created some particular karma that a spirit or a protector of the Dharma can actually enter into them and take over their body, like the Nejung oracle of Tibet. There's a ceremony done, and this particular protector enters into the body of the oracle. The oracle is like a human being who has a particular karmic connection with that. And then they take on the aspect of that. The eyes become very big, they become very strong. Their whole body sort of expands, and they can, before that, the monks put on the head of the Nejung oracle this heavy hat that takes 2 or 3 people to put on his head, and they have to hold his head while that. As soon as the spirit enters in, he stands up and he's dancing around and wielding a sword and everything. So there's something spectacular happening there. So this is not the kind of thing that was happening here. This particular being that Lama Tzong Khapa was a teacher of Lama Tzong Khapa had a mystic vision of Vajrapani. And Lama Tzong Khapa sought him out to ask questions of Vajrapani. And then Lama Tzong Khapa asked this being if he could communicate with Manjushri and ask questions, act as an intermediary to Manjushri. And eventually Lama Tzong Khapa was able to communicate with Manjushri directly. So wouldn't that be nice if we could get all of our questions, if we had that kind of.
Well, I was just thinking that, there's Manjushri ready to talk to you, and you're like, oh, well, I'll wait 6 months, then I'll talk to him.
If we had that opportunity, just go for it. So Manjushri had suggested to Lama Tzong Khapa to compose a Lan Rim that emphasized these three principles. Another thing that Manjushri had suggested to Lama Tzong Khapa was to emphasize the Buddhist logic, which was not held in such high esteem at that time. There were logicians, but they didn't necessarily apply that logic to emptiness or to conventional truth. Manjushri told Lama Tzong Khapa that in the future, it would be very important for the propagation of Buddhism, for the world, that the understanding of conventional truth being verified by logic was present. Say, for instance, I give an example. When people talk about emptiness, some misconception from high school of thought, the misconception is that because phenomena do not inherently exist, they don't exist at all. They are just illusions. Actually, Buddhism and the Buddha in his sutras always said phenomena are like illusions. Is there a difference? To be like an illusion and to be an illusion? To be an illusion means that, to be like an illusion means they appear, but they don't really exist the way they appear. But they still, conventionally, they still have a conventional coherence. We use the expression sometime in one of the last verses. So 9, 10, yeah. Whoever sees the causes and effects of all phenomena, this is verse 10. Whoever sees the causes and effects of all phenomena in cyclic existence and beyond, meaning samsara and nirvana, as unfailing, and thoroughly destroys the mainstay of misconceptions, that means they've destroyed the grasping to true existence, walks on the path that pleases the Buddhas. When we talk about cause and effect of being unfailing, if phenomena didn't exist at all, what would be the problem with killing a dog or another person or stealing? They don't exist at all. You would think that it's possible to fall into the nihilistic position that you can do whatever you want. There's no karmic consequences. So Manjushri had emphasized to Lama Tzong Khapa the need to, this logic that we were talking about before, about a logical statement, to be able to understand that was important, to be able to establish that phenomena do exist conventionally, although they're ultimately empty of inherent existence. They do still have a recognizable conventional existence, which is consistent, So, verse 11, so long as the understanding of appearances as unfailing, dependent arisings, the understanding of appearances as unfailing, dependent arisings, and the understanding of emptiness, free from all assertions, as long as these two seem disparate. What does disparate mean? I think Ruth I think she went to Oxford or Cambridge. Ada, what does disparate mean?
Possibly going in different directions.
Yeah, different. Yeah, kind of. You could say different. As long as they seem disparate. Oh, there we go. This is verse 11 on page 122. So long as the understanding of appearances as unfailing dependent arisings. So this is what we're talking about, that appearances are not just illusions. They are unfailing dependent arisings. the appearances that we have arise because of our karma, collective and individual karma. But they don't exist the way that they appear, but still there is a consistency. Those appearances will continue to exist until Buddhahood, you know, the appearances of being inherently existent. And they have a logical consistency in that this particular appearance of something unpleasant to you has arisen because of negative karma you've created in the past. There's no, as long as you find some difference, as though they were contradictory, with emptiness, you haven't yet, you still do not comprehend the subduer's thought. Here, the subduer is the English translation of Muni, like when we talk about Shakya Muni, right? Muni means subduer or sage. Do you know where that name came from, Shakya Muni? Why he's called Shakya Muni? James, do you know? Who's read about these things? Larry, do you know? Shakya Muni Buddhi. Why is he called Shakya Muni? When he was, if you have a chance to read the Lalita Vistara. Lalita Vistara means the play. Lalita means play, or it's another word in Buddhism that means kind of like an emanation of the omniscient mind, is kind of the play of the omniscient mind appearing in various ways. The Lalita Vistara is the story of the Buddha's life in Tushita heaven before he emanated to the world, how he came down to the world, performed the 12 deeds, turned the wheels of Dharma, and took the aspect of passing away. There's a very good translation in Dharma Publishing. Now I've forgotten what I was about to say about that. So long as the others. Oh, the subduer's thought. Yeah, why he's called a subduer. So once when he was a young boy, he had been born as the prince of the king and queen. He was obviously seen, even before he was born, there were auspicious signs, and he was prophesized. It was prophesized that he would either become a Buddha or a Chakravartin king, a world, a world dominating king. And so the father wanted him to be a king. So he's always, you know the story, he always protected his son from seeing unpleasant things in the world. He wanted him to have this ethos. When he was still a child, they brought him to a Vedic temple, Hindu temple, where there were many statues, because that was the prominent religion of the time. Even his parents had practiced this, Vishnu and Brahma and all of these various statues of these various gods. And when he got into the temple, the story is that the statues bowed to the young boy. Maybe it was an earthquake. They fell over. Anyway, people were astonished, and he was then known as the Muni of the Shakya clan. Sort of the sage of the Shakya clan. I'm not sure if I'm conflating that with another. So another incident during the May Day. You know what May Day is? The plowing festivals in Europe and so forth. We have that in the United States, when the king with a golden plow breaks open the earth and plants the first seeds. On the May Day, the plowing ceremony. The king his father was doing this ceremony. This is actually how he's called, the Muni, not the other. The other one is when he's called God of Gods, when the gods bowed to him. That's another name, another epithet for the Buddha. But the Muni came about when during this ceremony, the child, Siddhartha, sat under a tree in meditation all day long, while the sun came from, rose, went up into the sky at noon, went down, and he remained in meditative state all of that time. And the people were amazed. He's just a little boy, a couple of years old. And they said, "Oh, you are a great sage. You are a Muni. So you are the Muni of the Shakya clan." So that's why he was called Shakyamuni. So here this is another, in this text, he's translating Muni as subduer. As so long as the understanding of appearances as unfailing dependent arisings. So that means kind of like, you have this understanding, okay, everything is arising because of karma. You've learned in the training of the mind and then the Lanrim, everything that we experience has arisen because of our karma. But then when we study emptiness, it's almost as though nothing exists, right? They don't inherently exist, so that one can fall into the extreme of thinking they don't exist at all. How can it be that they're empty, but that karma still works? So long as the understanding of appearances is unfailing dependent arisings, and emptiness free from all assertions seem disparate, you still do not comprehend the subduer's thought, the thought of Shakyamuni, the Muni. Does that make sense, what that statement is saying? So when we're beginning to try to understand emptiness, one has to keep that in mind, that although it might seem incongruous to us now, that eventually we can get to the state where we recognize that appearances arise unfailingly due to karma, dependent arisings, yet they are still empty of the import that we're attributing to them, that sense of inherent existence. They are not contradictory. As long as they seem disparate, as one sort of contradicts the other, you haven't recognized the Buddha's intention, his thought. Susie, you look perplexed.
I have a question.
Yes.
If, for example, if I have a headache, that's not true, is it? Is it therefore not true that
if you have a headache, it's conventionally true.
Okay.
You could say, Susie has a headache. Why does Susie have a headache? Because Susie's head, within Susie's head, the tactile sensation is one of unpleasant feeling. Okay. So Susie doesn't inherently exist, but Susie Susie does not inherently exist, but Susie exists conventionally. Why does Susie exist conventionally? Because we can attribute the name Susie to your aggregates, including your form aggregate, which includes your head. The different parts. You could say, my arm aches, or my elbow, I've got tennis elbow, or my foot has been smashed, or whatever. So I have a headache. That means the conventionally existent Susie, her form aggregate is experiencing the feeling of unpleasant feeling, the suffering feeling.
But it's not inherently connected to me, so that therefore there can be a separation from it, right?
Well, the way that we can separate our angst, our, discomfort with that, like, oh, I've got a headache, is to meditate on emptiness and to recognize there's no inherently existent I, no inherently existent Susie. If one were to have a recognition of that, when you arose from that, the suffering would still be present, but you would be not so bummed out about it. It's like, it's there.
That's the feeling I had just then, that we can create a separation from the stuff that we think, the stuff that's happening.
In that sense, yeah, you can develop a kind of what's the word? It's a very common word, unattached to that. You're not. Right now, when we feel something, whether it be pleasant or unpleasant or neutral, we may be distracted by that. If it's something pleasant, because of the sense of an inherently existent I, did I say unpleasant? If it's something unpleasant, because of the sense of an inherently existent I, we can develop angered repulsion, sort of like tension. Even if something is there, your body tenses up. Sometimes people tell you, just relax, take a breath. And sometimes you can relax and let go of things a little bit, right? That's nowhere near the relief you can find through meditating on emptiness, but it starts to give an idea when you're not centered on something as being my pain, it's there. When people do shamatha in the Goenka tradition, in the Hinayana, these, Goenka was this Burmese teacher. I think Goenka's passed away, right? Does anyone know? Goenka's passed away. So he used to give these shamatha courses where people would just do breathing meditation for many weeks, and what they called vipassana, looking at the feelings within the body and so forth, walking meditation, between eating meditation, being mindful all the time when you're eating. So during that, it was taught that when you felt in your meditation, your knees started to ache. Oh my gosh, I can't sit any longer. My knee is killing me. Just to recognize that as a feeling, not to associate yourself as the owner of that feeling, sort of the inherently existent self. If you can divorce yourself in that way, having recognized there's no inherently existent self, it's just a feeling. Say, for instance, when we see other people suffering, if we see in the movies, these action movies, they have this kind of thing now. You see it so many times. A guy is running down the road and he's crossing the street, and then a truck comes and completely smashes him. They look so realistic. Have you seen those ones? It's just like, it's like mind-boggling. They obviously, it's some optical kind of trick, but if you were to see that in real life, you would go, you would feel great, distress, pain or suffering. But for a lot of times, if you just see ordinary pain in others, because it's not yours, you don't care. The ordinary worldly person on Wall Street, or, when we talk about giving aid to the poor, or, giving medical assistance to people of lower incomes, they say, no, they don't need that. That's not, that you're using my money, There's a certain kind of sense that that's other, and therefore there's no sense of empathy for them. Here we're thinking of it in a positive sense. If you have a sense that that's just pain, that's not an inherently existent my pain, it's just there. Does that make sense? You can kind of dissociate yourself from it that way, if you have an understanding of emptiness.
Thank you.
Yeah. So as long as these, as long as you don't see, as long as you see them as somehow contradictory, conventional reality and ultimate reality, you haven't understood the full intent of the Buddha's intent. And then just to read, because we're just out of time, when the two do not alternate, that means the understanding of how all of the appearances that we experience, when we say appearances, that means feelings, experiences, everything that we experience arises because of karma, unfailingly. There's no way to have an experience without having created the karma. As long as that seems, I say, here it says, when the two do not alternate, but are simultaneous. That means when you have an understanding of conventional reality arising from karma, that seems one thing. And then later when you meditate on emptiness, you say, oh, everything's empty of inherent existence. But you alternate between the two. You know, when you meditate on emptiness, that makes sense. When you meditate on karma and appearances, that makes sense. As long as they alternate, when the two do not alternate, but are simultaneous, that means you hold both understandings simultaneously, and merely seeing dependent arising as unfailing destroys the certainty how the object is perceived. What does that mean? The certainty that that is inherently existent, it is truly existent. Analysis with regard to the view is complete. We'll talk about this next time. Let's just introduce that first to you. So here the word analysis, when we're talking about our logical analysis, you know, the self is not one with the aggregates, it's not different with the aggregates. You also can do analysis how all of the appearances arise because of karma. Before we dedicate and finish the class, are there any last thoughts or doubts or questions? Christy, Victor, and Kate, I can't see, or Manuel. David's hidden again. I did see him for a while. Any questions? Victor, no? You okay? So, Shanka, why don't we do the written dedication verses and dedication prayers this time? Sometimes I'd like to lead in meditation. There we go. That's the beginning. That's not the dedication. That's taking refuge. There we go. Due to these merits, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. So if you think about the words, you know, we've meditated on this many times, thinking, I've created merits today. I'm going to dedicate them to my achievement of enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings, from which I can lead them all into that state. And then the bodhicitta prayer. May the supreme precious bodhicitta, here it says jewel, but Rinpoche just means precious. May the supreme precious bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. Also, you can think, as Serkon Senchab Rinpoche used to say, may the wisdom of emptiness that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. And long life prayer for Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Oops. You who uphold the subduer's moral way, that means, emphasizing the practice of the Vinaya, recognizing how causes and effects are unfailing, so that you observe karma. That means you avoid negative karma and you try to create virtuous karma. So that you who uphold the subduer's moral way, Shakyamuni's moral way, who serves as a bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine. You who masterfully accomplishes magnificent prayers, honoring the three jewels, Savior of myself and others, your disciples, please, please live long. And the Dalai Lama, O wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every benefit and happiness in the world, incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso, may your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. We're not wishing him, we're not beseeching him that his wishes be fulfilled. We're praying that his wishes be fulfilled. How could they be fulfilled? What are the obstacles? Negativities in our own minds. So, in a sense, praying that the obstacles to his wishes being fulfilled are eliminated. Tenzin Oso, Venerable One, to you whose kindness exceeds that of all the conquerors, for those wanderers in far-off places, especially the West, mindful of your loving concern for us and intentionally descending again into a family of a far distant land, we make this request, O Lama, please, please live long. And then to Geshe Sherab, who's just arriving today. Maybe he's in the air now. Beloved teacher, Geshe Sherab, leading your students toward wisdom and compassion, explaining through exacting discernment the steps of the stages of the path. You are the unequaled guide, or let's say an unequaled guide. Please live a long and stable life. So thank you for participating. It's good to see all of you. Good questions. If you have the chance to think about these subjects during the week, read a little bit, if you can, in the Lan Rim about how to meditate on emptiness. So this approach that we're using now, the 4 essential points, is recognizing the object of negation, recognizing the pervasion, recognizing that it's, the 2 alternatives, negating the 2 alternatives. Those are called the 4 essential points. This can be applied in many other ways, other logical reasons to prove emptiness, but that general procedure is something worth understanding. Thank you very much. See you next week. Welcome Geshe-la if you can.